Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our Careers in Health webinar as part of the JCU webinar series. This afternoon, we'll be hearing about the wide range of career options available in the human and animal healthcare industries from our presenter, Professor Richard Murray, Dean of the College of Medicine and Dentistry. My name is Regina Blackburn, and I am the manager of the Future Students team here at JCU. And today I'll be your MC for this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first inhabitants of this country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and elders past and present of the land on which we stand today. In the spirit of reconciliation, I also acknowledge the valuable contribution that Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples continue to make to James Cook University and the broader community. Now, some housekeeping before we get started today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We will be monitoring this function throughout the presentation and will raise your questions with our presenter when appropriate. We will also have some time at the end of the presentation to ask any additional questions you may have. If you have any IT difficulties during this session today, please use the chat function and our support team will assist you where they can. I will now introduce our presenter, Professor Richard Murray. Professor Richard Murray is the Dean of the College of Medicine and Dentistry at James Cook University. A medical practitioner with qualifications in rural general practice and public health, Professor Murray has a national and international profile in medical education and in rural health and medicine has held a range of senior leadership positions. Professor Murray is also president of Medical Deans Australia and New Zealand, the peak organisation for 23 accredited medical schools across 2 countries. His career has focused on the healthcare needs of underserved populations in rural medicine, Aboriginal health, tropical health, and socially accountable health professional education. Before I hand over to Professor Murray, we are going to start today's presentation with a short video.
I chose JCU because of the focus on rural and remote health. I like the fact that it's about bridging the gap, especially in Indigenous communities.
James Cook University had the reputation as producing the most work-ready graduates of any medical school in Australia, and they also had the best reputation for rural and remote medicine, and that was exactly what I wanted in a university.
I love the fact that we get twice as many hours as any other uni in the practical sense.
I had my first placement experience as a first-year student after just 12 weeks in the degree.
Deep breaths for me now, Peter.
There's so many students here, so lots of multidisciplinary teamwork.
Whether you're studying nursing, speech pathology, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, dentistry.
We get to do interprofessional learning, so every second week we get to come together as various disciplines and learn about different conditions, different things that might affect in different areas, and that's really good because it gives you a better idea of what's happening and how we might actually be able to work together to bridge the gap.
I think everyone had a job, within the first couple of months of graduation.
We're learning how to do things and we're work ready when we graduate, which is really, really nice.
Outside of the hospitals where the real fun starts.
Get to go to street parties, get to hang out with the locals.
We try and get the tinny out to the local river, go fishing.
Everyone's super friendly and I really love it here.
I'll look back on this 6 years as the best 6 years of my life.
Well, thank you very much, Regina, and hi everybody, and thanks very much for joining us. Interesting to see that video. Lots of faces I recognise, and it does remind you of how many things we're not doing at the moment, I guess, because of the travel and other restrictions associated with COVID-19. But that, of course, is the business that we're in, the health business. And it's perhaps at times like these that we might reflect upon the opportunities and the importance of considering a health career. And I know that that's why you've joined us today, so thanks very much. We're going to go through a series of, if you like, the menu of career choices in health that's available at JCU, and maybe share with you a little bit about what it is that makes JCU special, and maybe something that you might touch you as fitting who you think you'd like to be and who you think you are. So thank you. Next slide. It's interesting. A few years ago, when we were trying to describe what it is that characterises the JCU brand, or what we tend to be on about, our people, our partners, our students, our teachers, our researchers, we often pick topics. And you've heard some of them indeed behind me. I think I've got some pictures, rural, remote, tropical, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, international, global health. I mean, these are things that we as topics are very engaged in. But if you think about it, underneath that maybe are some deeper themes. The degrees at JCU in health and medicine tend to be for those who, in addition to having, obviously, a career that has prospects and employment and security, which is pretty much health careers, I'll come to that. There's the notion of study and career with adventure. A notion that you should, if you are looking to be prepared possibly to work in less supported or low resource environments at different stages in your career, then you need serious skills and experience. And we heard a bit about that in the video. And last, and maybe above all, it's about having an ambition that, in addition to work and career and remuneration and the rest of it, standing and status in a profession, there's also the notion that you can make a difference. You can have a career and study with impact. And I think those probably are the things that really maybe describe a little bit of sort of our special take on health and medical careers at JCU. So, building on that a bit more, we, as it says here, we put a lot of effort in actually providing people not only the theory, but with a lived experience of putting themselves out there, trying the unknown, finding it's an adventure and it's fantastic, and certainly working within and alongside underserved communities that might otherwise miss out on healthcare, is what really ignites the passion for many of our students and practitioners. Preparing people so that they're fully prepared to work anywhere, and that means having lots of practical experience. Don't skimp on the real world hands-on experience. You can't learn it all from a book or even a webinar. And therefore comprehensive curricula and so on. And look, as a result of this, you'd have to say, and certainly if you look at the data that's published on the national comparison websites, JCU graduates are in high demand, and 5 stars for employment, and I think none more so in the health professional areas, and I think with good reason. Next slide. Health as a job. When I was thinking about this, which to you is going to seem like a really long time ago, I guess I was quite good at, I was smart at school. I maybe wasn't from a traditional background for pursuing medicine at university, but I liked science, but I liked people. And I liked the idea of doing something that made a difference. And so that was part of the choice for me. I think another consideration is that really healthcare is a large and growing part of the workforce rather in Australia for obvious reasons. We've got a population at the moment about 25 million people. It's estimated that even as soon as 2030 that'll be 30 million people. And of course, as we know, that's within that population is an aging, relatively aging population, so there will be more older people. And of course, a larger mix of older people means larger demands upon healthcare systems. And so that's very much a part of a consideration for those who might choose healthcare, and job security is certainly part of it. But I think passion is just as important too. Next slide. We are obviously based in Queensland predominantly, although we've also got a substantial campus in Singapore, which is very interesting. And interestingly too, for those who know Queensland, we are sort of all over Queensland. We have most of our concentration of physical locations, training facilities, clinical schools and so on in the northern and western half of the state. But in fact, particularly if you look at what we're doing, because we'll come to it later, we also deliver general practice training. We cover really 90% of the state. So we sort of are all over. And I guess, again, you can see how we really embedded, we care about rural and regional communities, but we have students from all over the country and indeed international who are really interested in our approach to health and medicine. Next slide. We've got a number of programs that are, well, what would you call it? Sort of hotly contested, I suppose, where people are looking to get in, and there are special application processes for our Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, that's the medical degree. The Bachelor of Dental Surgery, that's obviously the dentistry degree, and veterinary science. We're going to talk a bit more about those degrees, and we'll come to it later, but you will see that if you're interested in those things, you have to make specific and special application. It's not just through QTAC. And so that's a piece of administrative detail to pay attention to if you're thinking about applying. Next slide. And so let's jump straight into those three. So the Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery. This is what would I call it? It's a full-blooded, no corners cut, full 6-year program, beginning to end, with early experience in communities and in clinics, tailoring up to very full immersion, and a lot of quite independent supervised practice in the latter part of the program, especially when students are doing small town, rural and remote placements, which there's ample opportunity to do. And Michael here is a nice quote from Michael. He's one of our great graduates who's currently working in the Burdekin and Ayr, and maybe he captures some of what interests lots of people, I guess, that you can do a lot of things in a very broad area with lots of hands-on, built on an understanding of how the body works, but also people and health systems and so on, as well as lots of practical experience. Look, everyone gets a job who wants a job, obviously, who comes out of the medical degree here, very highly rated in the country, currently the highest rated by graduates and students for what that's worth. And we really care about that in all of our programs. We very much feel like we're on a journey with students for them to graduate, but also with the notion that we're there to serve the communities that we feel we have a mandate to serve. Next slide. Of course, for those who don't realise, when you get your medical degree, that's just the beginning. It's sort of like when you finish primary school, there's secondary school, then there's university. So when you graduate in medicine, you get to spend a year as an intern, and then probably 2 or 3 years as what's sometimes called a junior doctor or doctor in training, and then further training in a specialty area, of which there's over 60 in Australia. One of which is general practice, and actually it's quite interesting. JCU's the only university in Australia that actually delivers the general practice, recognised accredited general practice qualifications and fellowships with the relevant specialist colleges. And so that's a unique thing about us, a joined up medical education and training across the route. Of course, many of our graduates go on and become many things, psychiatrists, surgeons, eye specialists and others, the full range, and work in all locations. Thank you. Next slide. Bachelor of Dental Surgery. So a sometimes neglected and terribly important part of the body, the mouth and the teeth, oral health. We have amazing dental training, really, if I say so. I mean, anyone who's had an opportunity to see our amazing facilities in Cairns at the Smithville campus, generally, particularly folk from other universities, they end up walking away greener than the building. And we have some fantastic facilities, honestly. And you can see here this great simulated training facility with 80 heads on sticks, for want of a better term, where students practice from very early and then get straight on relatively early in the program to provide supervised care for real patients. And so lots, again, big theme in our system, lots of first-hand experience, and also got this great flavour of adventure, which you wouldn't normally think about with any of these programs, you know. So our dental students are off doing placements as diverse as Cambodia. There are placements undertaken in the Solomons and others. We're very much into providing learning and service in remote communities, in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities. And so that's a fabulous part of the program. And indeed, people undertake placements in the Northern Territory, Tasmania. It's a great program. Lots of skills. People come out of this ready. And again, a defining feature of our programs. Dentistry is a ticket to the world, like all of these degrees. Thank you. Next. Veterinary science. Well, it's all of the above except for animals. In fact, my veterinary colleagues rather look down their nose at the human health professionals and say, well, you're only looking after one animal. And so veterinary medicine, obviously, you look after many animals. It's very much the same thing. The only, perhaps a different element here is that you're also looking after owners. I guess some of the, and that relates to companion animals as well as obviously livestock and more the farming and agricultural side of veterinary practice. You'd probably know that in veterinary medicine, there's a bit of a, people might pursue careers with small animal companion medicine, companion animal veterinary practice, for instance, and maybe that might be more of a flavour. Others pursue large animal careers. We're probably a little bit marked by the fact that we are really serious about preparing people both for companion animals and for larger agricultural animals and also wildlife. And you probably know James Cook University, we are very committed to our environment and looking after animals of all sorts, including turtles. And so just one of the animals that our vets look after. So for those who want a health degree, but not for the humans, at least not for the humans as the patients, just as the owners, then veterinary practice is a great choice. Again, lots of experience, lots of skills. Medical science careers. 3 we'll cover. Featured here, I notice, is one of my colleagues, Jeff Dobson, Professor Jeff Dobson. Tell you what, I could tell you a story about him, but gee, is this a great example of someone who got curious about the biological mechanisms of hibernation. How is it that animals can go to sleep and slow their heart rates down and not die, let alone hummingbirds that can do it overnight and then wake up again the following morning and get their heart right back into action? How does that work? Well, that research and curiosity led to this amazing science career where he's had extraordinary discoveries that I feel are very likely to transform saving lives in trauma on the battlefield with severe infection and other things. Absolutely fascinating. Anyway, great example. Next slide. Bachelor of Biomedical Sciences. Sometimes the choice of people who love to understand how the body works and the various sciences that go into that, and may have an applied focus in mind, might have a research focus in mind. Sometimes haven't decided what they want to do, except that it's going to be in this bioscience, biomedical sphere. Sometimes it can be a stepping stone as people make up their minds about what they like. And sometimes people, for instance, might apply, having done biomedical science for a while, apply to pursue, say, medicine or pharmacy or something else. And so it's a great preparatory career for many things, often in diverse industries, as you can see there, biotech, diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, marketing around those things and so on as well. It's a great foundation of biological science. Next, please. The med lab science is sort of an applied version of that, where you learn the skills to actually conduct diagnostic tests in health laboratories, usually human health laboratories, but not exclusively. Often that comes in different flavors. People might be interested in microbiology, hematology, biochemistry, and many other genetic areas that are emerging. And so it's that application of bringing together diagnosis in a laboratory setting with the knowledge of the underpinning sciences. Thank you. Next. Clinical sciences is another developing area. And so again, this is a little bit like the med lab science, except recognising that in many of the areas of health and medicine, alongside the traditional clinical roles, increasingly we have cadres of fully trained health professionals who have more technical roles, whatever that might be, often in testing, so respiratory testing, cardiac testing, sophisticated testing, and this is done by people who've pursued a degree in this, a growing area in healthcare. Next. Now you're wondering how many of these health careers are there? It's like a Chinese menu, and indeed that's true. And I'm probably going to give you more information than you can even remember, but at least it's a running skate across them so that you can have in mind something that might pique your interest and get back to what's involved. And so the allied health careers, sometimes this group is called, and we'll go through those. Thank you. Next slide. Occupational therapy. This has become an absolutely invaluable, recognised professional career over the past 20, 30 years. It is in all sorts of areas in healthcare, but increasingly, interestingly, in industry too. It recognises, it draws together many different strands of practical therapy, often associated with rehabilitation, but not always. So mental health, counselling, community-based work and so on is listed here. Oftentimes working in hospitals, in public hospitals and private hospitals, sometimes also working in private practice. Oftentimes being able to work in smaller facilities, you might be the occupational therapist and you're consulted by everybody and you have lots of people referring patients to you, young and old. And so a great area, occupational therapy. Thank you. Pharmacy, more recognised probably by most people, particularly those who've not had a lot to do with health. Pharmacists are the experts, I would say, in the quality use of medicines. We are taking more and more medicines as the science of treating disease develops, and having a sophisticated expert understanding of how medicines work and how to take them is recognised as a vitally important part of future healthcare. Current roles, established roles, obviously many people will have seen pharmacists at the community pharmacy, and that's of course a major part of the current work opportunities. Lots of demand, particularly in regional Australia, for graduate pharmacists to be employed in community pharmacy, but also hospital pharmacy, which probably most people wouldn't see from day to day, is another big branch. But increasingly pharmacists are finding themselves in other careers, notably being embedded actually directly in healthcare teams, including in primary care, and indeed we're involved in much research around these transformations. Thank you. Next.
Sorry, Richard, I'm just going to interrupt. I've just got a question about pharmacy. So it's come through. The question asked, I was curious about the future of job growth in pharmacy, as there is a current shift away from pharmaceuticals to bioorganism solutions.
Well, here's a person who's got, so I'd love to have a chat with that person. How interesting. Look, the truth is, whilst the different sorts of therapeutic compounds, if I might call them, is continuously evolving, and they include biologic agents, you still need experts in how those things work, in how they need to be taken, in the possible interactions with other health conditions or other therapeutic drugs, substances. And that's where the pharmacist comes in. So if anything, that means more roles for pharmacists. I have to say that whilst there are lots of opportunities for people to pursue pharmacy careers, I think sometimes people got a bit worried about the graduate numbers in the city and so on. I can tell you now there's lots of jobs in the city, but in the regions there's heaps of pharmacy jobs. And as I say, not just the current jobs. I feel very positive about the future of pharmacy because medicines are not going away, and bringing experts in the quality use of medicine into the healthcare team is the way the health system is going in this country and internationally. I think it's got a great future. One other thing I'd say, just for anyone who is interested, a significant reform we're just about to commence on is that actually we're going with model of delivery of pharmacy that's going to be much more multi-site. And so the good news next year for those of you who might be based in Cairns or Mackay is that you will be able to undertake pharmacy studies in those locations right through the program. So that's a very fascinating development, and certainly be happy to answer questions on that. However, we're on to physiotherapy. Most people know what physiotherapists do, but actually there's lots of different specialties in physiotherapy. A common link is practical physical therapies that may deal with all sorts of things for young and old. That might go from neurological conditions, that might go from musculoskeletal conditions. Some physiotherapists even end up not in healthcare, but in sports and conditioning. There's all sorts of roles most people would recognise. And I guess at a time when we're all keen on activity and recovery, and especially, as I mentioned, with ageing populations and the need for rehabilitation, there's a big role for physiotherapists in all of that. Thank you. Psychological science, psychology. This is the science of the mind. And so, so those who are interested in psychology as the primary degree typically are interested in how people work in a mental processing and psychological health and function sense. Interesting, it's not all into clinical psychology. Often people think psychology is like who you go and book to see if you require counselling or mental health care. And indeed, that is an important branch pursued after you do your foundation bachelor degree. But there are many other things too. Research areas, there's some examples here: forensic pathology, law, lots of ways in which knowledge of how people's minds work are applied in practice, including organisational psychology. So there's a fascinating branch of psychology. Next slide. Speech pathology, a smaller profession, very established, very important. As is noted here, speech pathology will often deal with children who may have speech and language difficulties, communication and difficulties and so on, but also oftentimes with more likely with older patients, especially those who are recovering from stroke, who might need to be retrained around swallowing and so on. So it's a discrete area about that focus on the function of swallowing and speech, with expert therapy in that area. And we're getting to the end, Bachelor of Sports and Exercise Science. And again, the jobs are in the name. These are careers that can be about conditioning for performance or conditioning for recovery, based upon an understanding of the underlying biological mechanisms of health and fitness. Thank you. Next. Nursing and the combined degree of nursing and midwifery. We've got fabulous offerings in nursing. We have fantastic programs, nursing science, because we're very keen about the foundation biological, social and psychological science aspects of nursing, in addition to ample practice in the profession of nursing. Again, a characteristic of all of our programs, lots of job experience, great reputation, people go everywhere, lots of choices about how you get into it, lots of career options in the community, in hospitals, in industry and so on. Australia's, and in the world, the largest of the health professions. Thank you. Next. So here's a bit maybe for you to Regina. You might explain a bit about the process by which one applies.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Richard. So with most of the courses that Richard has talked about today, you do need to submit your application through QTAC. Now, QTAC is the Queensland Tertiary Admissions Centre. There's state-based similar centres in each state. Applications for Queensland open on the 4th of August. Now, for those courses that Richard talked about right at the start of the presentation, so the medicine, the veterinary science and the the dentist, you do need to submit an additional application with those. All the information on how to go about that additional application process is on the JCU website. So I encourage you to jump on and have a look at that information there. Just while we do have everyone here in the webinar today, I did just want to run through an initiative that JCU has recently launched for Year 12 students who may be graduating this year. We have launched the Year 12 Student Success Package. We understand that a number of students are facing some terrible anxiety over, what's happening in their final year of school. And certainly in Queensland, there's been changes to the curriculum, and COVID-19 certainly has thrown a bit of a spanner in the works with everything that is happening. So we have launched the Year 12 Student Success Package to hopefully relieve some of the anxiety that students are facing this year, and yeah, just really reassure them that they do have a place at JCU. As a part of this package, we have 3 different elements that are available. So we have the early offer, the early offers. So if you're in Year 12 this year, you may be eligible to receive an early offer for your course. So how that works is there's a nomination form on the website that students are to complete in conjunction with their school. And then they submit that through to JCU. Within 48 hours, you will receive your early offer for your course. You also do need to submit your application through QTAC once those QTAC applications open on the 4th of August, and list JCU as your first preference. More information about the courses and to download a copy of the nomination form is on the website that we'll be able to share with you. The second element is the guaranteed admissions plan. Now, this allows entry for guaranteed entry into majority of JCU's courses based on ATAR results. If you receive an ATAR of 90 and above, you are guaranteed entry into most of JCU's courses with subject prereqs waived. For this plan, you don't need to submit an application. It's automatically applied through your QTAC application. And again, please see the website for details on this program and the courses that are included in this one. We've also got some adjustment factors. So JCU is offering bonus ATAR points depending on whether you live in regional or remote areas of Queensland, and the subjects that you successfully complete at school, such as maths, science, and languages. Again, really similar to the guaranteed admissions plan. For these adjustment factors, you don't need to submit an application. It's automatically applied through QTAC. So please see the website for details on this one, and also the courses that are included in this program as well. So that basically wraps up the formal part of our presentation today. We do have some time set aside for some questions, and I know there's been some really great questions through. So I'm just going to jump into the Q&A.
And just whilst you're having a look, Regina, and maybe picking 1 or 2 out for me that you think we should go to, I really would welcome any comments or questions. Probably the things that I can help, things that are mechanical, if you like, that you can look up on the website. How do I find this form, etc. Someone can get back to you and help you with that, or you can look it up yourself. So maybe that may not be the best use of your time. Probably I would be really advising you, because there's a big why in all of this, isn't there? Why would I choose to study this over something else? And what's it like as to study, and then what's the career like, and why would that suit me, and why might JCU be a choice for me? And so that why piece is probably the most relevant piece. But I'm happy to answer anything that I possibly can.
Thanks, Richard. I do have one here. What's the difference between a Doctor of Medicine and a Bachelor of Medicine?
What a great question. In Australia, nothing, other than one is pitched at a so-called Australian Qualifications Framework Level 9 or Masters Extended, and the other is pitched at the traditional level as a bachelor degree. Interestingly, so that's the technical difference. Beyond that, in terms of content, recognition for the purposes of registration as a medical practitioner, in terms of the relevance to any future training in any specialty, there's no difference at all at present. We are one of a small number of medical schools in Australia and New Zealand who've chosen not to go with the others and transform our degree into a short postgraduate MD or Doctor of Medicine degree, which is largely following a North American tradition, really. We've stuck with the traditional structure, partly because, in our view, we would like to have the full 6-year proper medical degree so that we can have the adequate time of preparation. Interestingly, it doesn't necessarily mean it's longer because, of course, as folk would know, to do another medical program, you would typically have to do a prior degree and then into a 4-year MD degree, and so it might even end up being the same or longer. So that's maybe an explanation, I hope.
Great, thank you, Richard. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so I'm just going through them. I've got one here. If I do biomedicine, what major should I take to later on consider doing medicine?
So look, there's no, I think probably the most important, so firstly, there are prerequisites that come through from, in relation to high school. So that you need to make sure those are covered off on. And if there's any of that's missing, for instance, maths or chemistry, you'd be wanting to make sure that those things are picked up in a biomedical studies, because you do have options and electives. That would tend to be the case anyway, but that would be the first choice. In relation to that, I think people should choose things that they are passionate and curious about. Doing well to get into one of the contested spots in, say, dentistry or medicine, in whatever you do as a first degree, if you want to keep that option open, is important. And in any case, if you're studying things and that doesn't end up occurring, then you would be wanting to probably pursue things that kindled your interest and excited you, and that you relished the idea of maybe pursuing further in an alternative career direction. So I hope that's not too vague. So it's not a specific answer. There's no particular advantage of any subject choice over anything else beyond those considerations.
Great, thanks, Richard. This question probably stems from that one as well. Is it possible to complete years of a degree in biomedicine and then go on to complete a postgraduate in medicine at JCU? What are the requirements, if so?
Yeah. So look, great question. So it is possible to pursue, let's say, a Bachelor of Biomedical Science degree, complete a year or possibly 2 years of that, and if you're getting good grades, have a successful application and move across into medicine or another program. Typically, you would be able to do so with what we call advanced standing. So it's not quite the same thing as graduate entry, but it essentially would mean that depending upon what you've done, you might be given credit for the first year and you go into the second year or something of that sort. So it's not a graduate entry, but it's counting what you've completed successfully already towards and not having to sort of do it twice. Alternatively, those grades can be used to apply for other graduate entry programs, of which there are numbers, of course, around the country.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard.
I should say, sorry, another thing I should say there is probably about 20% of our students coming into medicine would be coming in having completed or partially completed another degree. So about 1 in 5, sometimes 1 in 4. So it's not unusual at all.
Great, thank you. Now, I have a question here. I was wondering if you had any advice for aspiring, I've just lost the question because I've got a few coming through. Where have we gone?
I can see it. An aspiring Bachelor of
Medicine. Yes, that's the one.
To make extracurricular things to make them stand out. Look, it's hard, isn't it? I guess as people know, that there's no. I wish I could provide tips. There's none really. I guess what we're keen on, obviously, is that people have looked into it thoroughly and understand what they're getting into. You know, if showing that you've made had some personal experience and have gone to the effort of finding out more about it and had to look at things is probably the most important criteria. I wouldn't rate, it's not as if we have some schedule of points where if you've done a rural this or an Indigenous that or something, you get extra bonuses. It's much more looked at in a holistic way. And in any case, if your grades are there and you go on to interview, then they're the more powerful predictors of or criteria for whether or not you get an offer of a place.
Great, thank you. Another question here. For someone who would want to study something such as genetics, what course would you recommend looking into?
Wow, what a great question. And gee, isn't that going to be some of the careers of the future that probably we can barely even imagine? Look, the answer to that actually is pretty much all of the above. Isn't that an interesting answer? That any area of health professions and health sciences can have an interest or indeed a focus ultimately on looking after people or diagnostics of or research into the genetic basis of disease or people who are suffering conditions that might relate to inherited disease or genetic mutation. So sort of any of the above. If you're coming at it from a sort of a research angle and a sort of scientific discovery angle, or diagnostics angle, then probably biomedical sciences would be the direct studies of those. But pretty much any other health professional area, a primary degree and then people pursuing perhaps as an area of further study after they complete their primary degree as, say, a research degree with a focus upon genetic conditions or genetics science would be another way to do it. So sorry, that's a bit vague, but so straight down the line would be obviously biomedical sciences, but any professional area, including medicine, can end up having a specialty interest in research or clinical care with people with inherited conditions or mutations that result in problems.
Excellent, thanks Richard. I've got a really good question here. What is rural generalist? Is this a good career choice?
What a great question. Okay, so look, for those of you would probably have some awareness of, let's say, the old-fashioned country doctor. So it's the sort of role that I've trained in and practiced in. So cradle to grave, community clinic to home, to the emergency department of the hospital ward, retrievals, flying visits, all of the above. And so basically the do-it-all doctor is sort of the tradition. And that's an old-fashioned tradition of country general practice or country doctor. The modern terminology in this, and many JCU graduates go, about 1 in 6 actually, go on and pursue careers in rural generalist medicine. And so that's pretty much what I've just described, do-it-all doctors. And so they can deliver babies and go to the emergency department and all of these things in addition to having a core interest in primary care and knowing and working in communities. It's a type of general practice, a more expanded version in the specialty of general practice. Interestingly too though, rural generalism is now a feature, and JCU has been a big advocate for this, in other health professional areas as well. So we've got some great programs in allied health rural generalism. Isn't that interesting? So being an allied health practitioner, but not just having a single, if you like, discipline area in allied health, having a much broader suite of skills and abilities, probably drawing from across a number of the allied health areas. And so that's rural generalist allied health. And indeed, we're interested in rural generalist dentistry as a developing area. There's talk of rural generalist nursing. Again, there's long traditions in nursing of the nurses who do it all. And certainly rural, remote, underserved areas, global, in a global health setting, these sort of practitioners are in great demand. And those are careers that appeal to people who like adventure, who would get bored if they didn't have a variety, and who are up for a challenge. That's not everyone in health, and there's plenty of other choices in any of these careers where you might, for instance, focus in on maybe a discrete area of practice or interest. The rural generalist is pretty much the exact opposite, focus in on everything. So there you go, there's a description.
Excellent, thank you, Richard. Now, we're all experiencing some different arrangements from learning and working from remote locations at the moment, and this is an interesting question in relation to the current situation. Is there a possibility that medical interviews will be conducted online rather than face-to-face, given the situation we are in this year? I'm not sure if that decision has been made yet, but you might be able to shed some light.
Yeah, so look, I think it's sort of 95% made that we will be doing this online. Now, there may be, don't write that down and hold me to it. I mean, there may be some tweaks. We already do online for those applicants who are applying into medicine from overseas. We do that online. I think that we don't imagine that the country would have opened up to the extent that would allow everybody to be, for instance, flying into Townsville for interviews. And indeed, airfares are going to be probably expensive and maybe difficult to organise. And so I think that we're pretty much made the decision that it's going to be online offerings. We're working through the technical aspects of that. As you can imagine, that there's a bit of logistics around all of that. So that's sort of where we're going to land, I think. That's not on the website yet, but that's pretty much the advice.
Great, thank you, Richard. I'm just going through and finding another question for you to answer. I'm not sure if you've come across any that seen.
Yeah. Okay, can you change around? So this is quite an important one, and you might be able to answer this better than me. So there's a question about if a student applied for a degree, say the Bachelor of Biomedical Science via the early offer program, can they change to, say, apply for a Bachelor of Dental Surgery later on? The answer is yes. So there are, throughout the whole QTAC dance, right up to the death knock, is that? No, that's the wrong thing to say.
Change of preference.
Change of preference and swap your preferences around, you know, as your thinking matures. And that's very welcome and indeed is quite common.
Yeah. Yeah, and just in relation to the early offer on that as well. So if students are considering courses that are available through that early offer program, we do encourage them to submit their application for an early offer. They will need to list that particular course as their first preference in QTAC once applications open. They will then actually receive a formal offer through QTAC as well as the offer communication from JCU, and post receiving that official offer from QTAC, can change their preferences to put down one of those programs that aren't available through the early offer program. So that's definitely doable with those courses.
Thanks. I was approximately correct, I think.
Yes, yeah. Well, the early offer program is only very new to JCU this year, so it's exciting to see the number of students that we have already issued offers to this year. Okay, so we do have a number of questions in here around the application process for particularly for medicine. Now, I did mention before that you do need to apply through QTAC and then the additional application requirements through JCU. Richard, are you able to talk through maybe a little bit about the additional process? I know we've touched on, you know, the online interviews being quite a high possibility of that.
Well, look, again, and I see there are a few questions there that are quite specific. So I might just try and answer it in the broader. So first to say is that they're into medicine and the other application programs, there's a first pass, which is looking at a written application that is intended, that is rated and understood, and is intended to show awareness and seriousness, I suppose, about looking to apply for one of those courses. And so I think that's the first step. In the past, that has been a handwritten application. There's a question about that. That is not firmly decided what that will be this year. It could be a handwritten application, but we will provide further advice. If not, it'll be typed. And that is sort of the first gate, if you like. If it's regarded as suitable, this is a suitable application, Then there's a subsequent consideration based upon academic performance and rankings, with some consideration of the amount of rural schooling that people have undertaken, that may have some weighting in there. And then for medicine specifically, there is a group of about 700 or so will be invited to participate in an interview, a structured interview, and then the two pieces of data, the adjusted academic achievement plus the interview, come together to give a rank, and then the offers are made on that basis. So that's sort of how it works. Beyond that, therefore, it's hard to say, if I get an ATAR of X, can I be assured of a place? No one's assured of a place, but because maybe you weren't serious, you didn't put the effort in, or you hadn't put much into your application, and it couldn't be rated as suitable. But more likely, but anyway, bring it all together. I guess if you do really well, that certainly improves your chances. Doing well on interviewing in medicine combines with that, and those two things help to create the list from which offers are made.
Great, thank you, Richard. I do have another really good question here. How is occupational therapy different to physiotherapy in relation to the profession and the course as well?
Yeah, so look, they're companion professions. I suppose you would call the occupational therapy a bit of a jack of all trades role in my mind, where I would refer and have referred to occupational therapists for all sorts of things, from making of splints, for instance, and devices, and adapting them for the use of that person to assist them in mobilising or to recovering from an injury or something, to formal counselling and mental health care, to other aspects of physical therapy and recovery, to sometimes engagement in the workplace and assessment to protect people from injury and harm. So it's a very broad field. It's a bit of a jack of all trades, Jack or Jill of all trades. And so it's interesting. Physiotherapy also can have some specialty focus, although that's often developed afterwards, but it tends to historically be around physical therapies, rather than, for instance, around counselling, mental health, making devices or other sorts of things. That said, like all of these allied health areas, there is overlap, and sometimes you might choose to refer people to a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist, or they might work together, or whatever. There's overlap. Great question.
Thanks, Richard. Another really good question. You did touch on it briefly in the presentation around a number of the different courses, but what are placements like? Now, this is a bit of a broad question, particularly for medicine and the dentistry programs. What are some of the placements or the practical elements that students get to experience through these courses?
Okay, so the first thing is that there is a lot, and they're diverse. Oftentimes in many of our programs, the amount of practical experience, and I'm not talking in groups of 50, practical experience in small groups in healthcare settings, may be up to twice as long or more as might be available in other programs. And so there's a lot of emphasis on practical skills. It's one of the things we really believe in. We place, the settings are diverse. Across most of our programs, people would have experience in, for instance, an acute public hospital setting, in different sorts of wards, medical, surgical, rehab, and so on. Oftentimes in residential aged care or subacute care rehabilitation settings. Oftentimes in community practice, be that community primary care, community allied health practice, community pharmacy practice, all of those areas, and indeed different professions. We're keen on getting experiences in different sorts of settings, even if that is not their own area of study, because we are very keen on people working together as teams in healthcare, and so practical experience is important in that. A big feature for us is rural and remote experience, and all of our programs would offer either substantial parts of the program or lots of choices and opportunities to go bush, And by bush, we don't mean Townsville or Cairns. And so really very interesting, and it's remarkable the things that people do. Increasingly, we provide people opportunities to do that overseas as well. For instance, there's a lot of activity in places like Fiji, Solomon Islands, and elsewhere. And so we're very keen on sort of global health opportunities for those folk who are interested and keen to always accommodate those interests.
Great, thank you, Richard. I think that just about wraps everything up today and all the questions. Obviously, we weren't able to get to every single question that was posted to the Q&A today, but hopefully that has given everyone a very broad overview as to the careers in health that are available. We will be sending a follow-up email with a copy of the webinar, so if you did want to revisit any of the information that has been shared today, you can. And also the JC website is obviously the best source of information as to any entry requirements, prerequisites for courses, the application forms for those specific programs, as well as the information on the Year 12 package that was covered off today. So I just would like to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar today.
Thank you.
And
can I thank you and the team who put it all together, and look to everybody who's online. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that was some information about exploring or considering health careers, and if you do, to consider whether or not JCU might be the fit for you. It's the fit for many. And for all of the reasons I hope we've explained, many choices. Good luck with your deliberations. Good luck with your futures. Thank you.